The recap is, follow your guidelines, but don't feel like you have to hold back the creativity. I really want to develop the sense of volume on all my objects. I want to, always keep in mind where the light source is. That's going to help me create that sense of volume. Taking it from a basically outline sketch to trying to create the shape out of that. Right now I'm going to start working on some of the immediate background here, and what we've got is a pile of cars in a junkyard. And what I'm going to be doing with a lot of interesting stuff with the light is making it look like there's some sort of force, like bringing all these cars back to life, bringing all the lights out, and just having the lights going in all sorts of different directions and creating a lot of interesting effects coming off her body. So right now we're just going to work through here. Just kind of imagine some of the light reflecting off of the steel in the cars. Again, going back to some basic principles of how light interacts with shiny surfaces. It's going to take very little bit of light to illuminate these surfaces on the cars. So we're going to kind of keep that in mind as we're doing this to create this illusion of these cars piled up, all lighting up each other. A lot of the lights in the cars will be washed out a little bit when we come back in with some of our grays, but we're going to put them in place right now anyway, and then when we do our final highlights, we'll bring them back out. I'm going to use some shielding where it's necessary to help keep some of the real crisp edges on the metal and stuff, and it really adds to the effect of creating the chrome. And we discussed, bringing things into focus and contrast in the foreground. By selectively using your shield, you can emphasize that. Since these cars have been hanging out in the junkyard for a while, some of this trim and the chrome isn't going to be perfect. So as you're using different angles on the shield and maybe not perfect curves, it helps kind of add to that crusty look that I'm kind of going for on these cars. Okay, we've got a lot of this stuff happening here with the cars, really trying to create that unstable feeling, like these things could fall off the pile any minute. Something that we also want to take into consideration as we're developing this image from our imagination is how to set up the perspective to create the illusion that these cars are wrapped in all around her. So there's a real gradual arc here off to what would be somewhat of an imaginary horizon line where the cars are piled up and you'll start to see the sky. So that's all a part of also trying to create that emphasis on the image, the center focus part being encapsulated by these cars piled up. A lot of stuff will be done with the value that we use for the final, also creating a sense of atmosphere, level in which the contrast is going to be more in the foreground. And as we get further away into the background, there'll be less contrast, which will also help enhance that sense of perspective. But also, while we're working with this stuff, something to consider is things we discussed about the reflective surfaces. What I've done is I've used a lot of loose hand shielding on the chrome bumpers and such in the car. So it helps to provide a real crisp reflection, again enhancing the idea that we're dealing with a chrome surface. A lot of the colors that we're going to be doing in here, mostly monochromatic, but all this stuff will be reflected in its environment. You'll see other things interact with the reflections as we develop the painting a little bit more. Again, I'm going to use my shields where it's necessary, especially in these objects in the immediate foreground. And I'm also going to bring this level of the white, the application of white, probably to its fullest in the painting, you know, aiming towards anywhere between 90 and 95% of application for being, you know, solid, opaque white. Using a paint stick to emphasize some of the straight lines in this part of the image. Okay, I got the foreground pretty much finished up on this side. Changed a few things up regarding the look of the car here in the foreground. Add some fenders and stuff for some more reflective stuff, and I'm going to go ahead and start over to this side here and you know, ad-lib a little bit with the surfaces as well as the shape of some of the mechanicals of this guy who's getting squashed by our evil little junkyard dog. Now I'm going to work on the area in front of the headlight and try to capture some of the lighting on top of the fender as well. Now we're going to set up the glow in front of the headlight, and then we'll start to illuminate some of the character in front of it. I'm going to come in here and just kind of lay out some nice line work here to set up the character, get all the definition, and then come back in and then start to illuminate the basic shapes, the shields, the spheres, the cylinders, and try to create the vast amount of interactivity of light that's going on around it. Started on this side with my kind of like Terminator-like guard dog here and junkyard wrench. This guy was kind of like vandalizing a little bit of stealing some parts maybe. But anyways, as I drew it, the skull needed to be a little bit bigger to provide with a little bit more of a sense of perspective. So I took some rubbing compound and wiped out the white, and I'm going back in with the white now. I'm going to redo it. Anytime you're doing a project like this, you know, nothing's really set in stone, as we mentioned, with the level of creativity and things you may add. In this particular case, working on the front here, I wasn't quite happy with the sense of perspective that I was getting from the sides of the skull. So, you know, being that it's not all rigid masking, it's all done freehand, it was simple enough just to come in here with some rubbing compound, take the white off, and we'll start it over again and make it look right. I'm going to start with some of the light features that are going to be most affected by the light source coming from the headlight. It's going to be almost 100% white application through this area to really help emphasize the effect of how close this object is to the headlight. A lot of tiny little dagger strokes will help tell the story of all these intricate edges and the sharp, crisp reflections coming off of them. I'm going to use my shielding to help crispen up some of these edges. Now I've got this other light source that's coming from inside the scavenger here, and that's going to illuminate some of the connective materials and the robotics that kind of keep them all together. I like to break the hand down into a series of shapes, and I use like dividing points at edges and knuckles where the light will change from one plane to another, almost as if you're looking at a cube being illuminated by one side. Now I'm going to emphasize the light coming around the sides of the eyes, and almost to kind of give it a glowing-like effect. Keep remember where the major light source is affecting what we're painting. I'm at a good point where I want to finish up the rest of these little details down here, but then I think I should probably step away from the painting for a few minutes. I'm going to come back in and do some balancing on some of the whites and some of the values in order to ensure that I've got enough brilliance down where I want it before I start working with my darker colors. That way I don't have to come back in later on and add too much highlight work to it, which will tend to muddy it sometimes in certain areas. But right now, I'm pretty happy with the progress I made. I got my action going on over here. My little skull Terminator guy kind of getting squashed here from behind with his little blowtorch. And I've created a lot of interesting areas for lighting to take place. Light from the headlight here, as well as the light kind of glowing from the guy, and then also the flame stuff. So it'll provide a lot of interactivity throughout here. And we're gonna go ahead and finish this up. I'll probably be bouncing around back and forth between here for a little while, but we're gonna go ahead and finish up the last of the detail work. Okay, keeping with our monochromatic theme, what I've done is I've taken this gray that I've sprayed on the panel for the background color, and I've darkened it up with some black and a little bit more reducer, thinned it out quite a bit. I'm going to start doing some of the medium tones with this, as well as setting up for some of the other darker imagery that will be going on, different areas that have the almost pure black in them. So we're going to go ahead and start roughly in the same fashion. We start with white. I'm just going to start in the middle of the painting, and I'm going to work my way out. At this point, you know, I've spent so much time on my white that I'm not going back in and destroying everything I did with the white. I'm actually kind of painting in between the values that I've created with the white. And I'm going to define those a little bit, but I'm not really going over top of the white. I'm more or less working inside the areas that were left behind by the lack of the white being there. Now as we do the bands, we'll set up the core shadow that runs down through the length of the arm, just as it does in the forearm. Okay, part of the illusion we're going to go with here is the stack of cars. You'll notice that I'm doing some really soft, unfocused type of line work on here. It'll enhance the whole sense of perspective here that we're working with, and also complement a lot of the really sharp detail that we're going to have in our image in the foreground. So just really soft strokes, nothing really defined. Some of this work with this color may wash out some of the intensity of the light in the headlights that I'm already kind of got established there, but I'm not too worried about it because I'll be coming back in with the highlights again at the end. Most of the work that I'm doing right now is just a very unfocused, soft application of tone. Now we're going to work on the other side and render the cars piled up on top of each other, as well as the details on the right side of the body that separate the foreground from the background. Keeping everything very crisp in the foreground is again a way that I'm trying to emphasize a sense of perspective. Now I'm going to go ahead and take some of this color and I'm going to define some of the elements in the piles of the cars. Some of the shadows, some of the edges where the light's reflecting off the roof and stuff, and I'm doing it pretty randomly.